Welcome back to another episode of Coventry Confidential. This is a local podcast for local issues. This time round, for our second episode, I have Matthew Kyer, who is also a town council member, just like our first podcast, John Han, who was also a town council member. So let's get the, origin story out of the way, Matthew. But first, I'm sorry. Welcome to Coventry Confidential. Thank you for giving up a bit of your Sunday afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. How are you?
Good. Enjoying our sort of cold spring day. I mean, it just doesn't want to get, winter just doesn't want to give it up yet. So
This is New England.
yes, I know. And I love I love the weather because it's just at times very unpredictable, and you just have to sort of get it together and just enjoy it. So let's just jump into it, because I promised I was going to make this podcast a lot shorter than my other podcast that I host. How did you end up in Coventry?
First thing that I would want to say is that although I've only been in Coventry for 19 years, and you live in a New England town when you say something like, I've only lived in Coventry for 19 years, I very much now consider Coventry to be my hometown. And to explain that, I have to tell you that I grew up in a Navy family. So I spent my youth bouncing around from place to place. I even lived overseas in Scotland. My father ended up in Groton at the submarine base. He was the chief of the boat of a couple of submarines down there and ended up retiring in Groton. So I graduated from high school in Groton and attended UConn, which is how I ended up in this area. My wife and I lived in Willimantic. We lived coincidentally in Scotland, Connecticut. So I've lived in two Scotlands in my life. But when we were getting ready to send our daughter to middle school, which would have been Parish Hill, we realized that we wanted her to have more opportunities and options than Parish Hill had to offer. So we really were looking to move based on school systems.
Ah,
And we knew people who lived in Coventry. We did a little research. We knew what Coventry had to offer. And that is how we ended up in Coventry.
now you're also a teacher, not only a parent with a student in school, but how long have you been a teacher?
I have been a teacher my entire career.
Oh, okay.
Next year will be my 30th year of teaching.
Congratulations.
And I do teach. Hey, thank you. And I do teach here in Coventry. I haven't taught in Coventry my entire career. I taught in Stafford for 11 years, but the majority of my teaching career has been spent here in Coventry. Um, and although I'm no longer a parent of students in the Coventry system, my kids are now 28 and 31. I still see education through both lenses, as a parent and as an educator.
You decided to come to Coventry, like a lot of people, because of the school system. And I guess the school system, and I'm new, I've been here since 2016, and I do not have kids in the school system. But the school system, I guess, for your children, it was already looking up, basically, because I have heard stories that the Coventry system wasn't that great, but then it had a turnaround. So you guys saw that turnaround and saw the potential there for your children.
We did. Yes.
Now,
yeah, and I can give you one concrete example.
Yeah.
So both of my students, both of my children, were excellent students, and because of that, they were able to take advantage of taking classes that allowed them to earn college credits through the University of Connecticut. When they then went on to college, and they were both accepted at very good schools, thanks to the Coventry school system, they were both able to graduate a semester early
Mm.
because of the credits that they had earned in high school. And so you can imagine 2 semesters that their parents didn't have to pay for was a significant savings.
Yeah, and I've always said this since I got involved in, sort of started seeing town politics, is that the school system is a economic driver in a lot of different ways. It makes the town, housing, market is very, I guess strong, and also it can save parents money in the long run. Can you seeing for maybe with your parent, teacher, and town council hats on, how does that all work? How do you see it with how the school system is an important part of this town and its influence and everything with this town?
Sure. So I know that the house that I own is my biggest investment. And there will come a day when my wife and I are going to either want to or need to sell our home. I know that the better the school system, the more likely it is that I am going to make a significant profit off of the sale of my home. People want to move to towns where there is a strong school system, where they know that their children are going to be able to experience not just a great educational environment, but also all of the options that a school system can bring.
I don't know. What are some of those rundowns?
Sure. So those would be the additional programs that a school system might offer. So um, foreign languages at the high school. Coventry has the CEP program, and forgive me because I don't remember exactly what CEP stands for,
I
but
was about to ask you
basically,
that.
it's a challenge and enrichment program. So
Oh,
there,
okay.
I remembered. So for students who just need that additional drive, we have a CEP program. We have, and I am a school librarian, but every one of our 4 schools has a full time school librarian right now, which is very important.
Hmm.
We have a strong arts program. These are things that not every school system has. We currently have those programs, and we can talk about even the sports program. Our high school girls basketball team just won the state championship.
Yes, they did. So,
Yes. So those
since
would
what,
be those,
1988 or something? 1988 was
I
the last time?
think, 1988.
That's something to be very proud of. Yes. So,
Yeah.
well, first, before we move further on, what were your kids? What are their thoughts about their experience here? Seeing you guys decided to move into Coventry, and they're in school already. But what was their experience, going through this system, and then how it allowed them to get into college and everything? How do they look back at it?
The first thing I should say is they probably regretted the fact that their father was a teacher in the school system and knew all of their teachers.
So they couldn't get away with anything. So,
First and foremost, they established lifelong friendships here in Coventry. And my son and my daughter are still very close to some of their high school friends. My son lives in Pennsylvania, but he still is very much in touch with some of his Coventry high school friends. Their experience allowed them to be accepted to and attend some very good schools. My daughter attended Mount Holyoke in Massachusetts. My
oh yeah,
son attended Juniata College in Pennsylvania, which is why he is still now in Pennsylvania. Also, it was Coventry High School for them was a perfect size. We next door in Mansfield have E.O. Smith High School, which has a much larger student population. Being kind of a big fish in a small pond can feel kind of good for students. And when the pond is just too big, it's easy to get lost. So I think they appreciated the size of Coventry High School. And of course, their teachers. Um, they had a really great experience, really talented teachers here in Coventry, and really caring teachers.
So they went on to four-year colleges, and I guess you as a teacher, and also everything with all your hats on. I mean, if somebody decides not to go to a four-year college because we had that conversation, or they want to go on a different path, um, because there are different paths. I mean, what is the thing that you think that Coventry schools from K through 12 really prep their students for when they have to go in, become adults and go out into the world at 18 and make some decisions, of what their path will be for their next chapter in education?
Sure. One of the things that Coventry Public Schools has established while I've been there, and this is under the direction of our superintendent, Dr. Patrone, is something called the Portrait of the Graduate. And the Portrait of the Graduate is really trying to um, focus in on preparing students for lifelong learning. So instead of thinking about just preparing students to attend four-year colleges, it's about preparing students to graduate and be prepared to be full-on citizens. So, one thing that comes to mind for me, an important part of that portrait of the graduate, is just becoming critical thinkers.
Yeah, yeah. And is that just the accumulation of of education during these schools, or is there a I guess a roadmap for every student to have that come out with this critical thinking? Is it just because of the experience, or is there a plan, I guess?
Yeah, the plan is to, as curriculum is being developed, teachers are tasked with pulling parts of that portrait of the graduate into the curriculum. So um, the our students, instead of just, I'll use the example of learning math.
Mhm.
Hopefully, they're learning math in a way that provides real world examples, that prepares them. And I'm going to go back to the critical thinking piece,
Yep.
or we can tie that into history and social studies, high school civics, things like that.
Now, you mentioned being the librarian and also the extra curriculum, everything with even to sports. That all costs money. But do you feel, and that adds to the school budget, and eventually we will be talking about budget season here. But I mean, do you feel that's worth the money? Because a lot of schools cut those. And you read an article about everything being cut and basically all you have are classes and there's nothing else. But I mean, I went to a prep school and sports were important. Other things were important. And I feel it helped me, on top of the education I got. Uh, do you feel it's worth the investment in these, and that these things, along with the curriculum, should be vibrant and really contribute to everything that the school system's trying to do for the students?
I
I think I
absolutely
answered my question already. Sorry. You do, yes.
I
I
I
guess
live
that's a
in
lot softball.
yeah, I again, as I said, I've been an educator my entire life. Um,
Mhm.
I have in my adult life, I can't even. I'd have to do the math how many students I've worked with, and I know that there are just lots of different kids out there with a lot of different interests, a lot of different needs, different personalities. Although it's true that a lot of kids might be drawn to sports, there are other students who are more drawn to drama or music, robotics,
Mhm.
any number of things. And we are doing a disservice to our children if we aren't respecting the fact that we have different kids with different needs and different interests.
What else do you do for this town? I mean, I know there's some other volunteer stuff along with being a teacher and a parent and also on the town council, but I know there's some other things my wife has mentioned that you've been involved in. So if you want to run, give me, run down that.
Sure. So I grew up in Boy Scouts, Troop 18 in Groton, Connecticut. I did achieve the rank of Eagle Scout. My son was also very involved in Boy Scouts and was in both Troops 57 and 65 here in Coventry back when we had two troops. Now we just have Troop 65. He also achieved the rank of Eagle Scout thanks to a lot of volunteers who give up their time to be scoutmasters and assistant scoutmasters. I continue to be involved in Scouts as a merit badge counselor. I work with Scouts specifically who are working towards earning the citizenship merit badges that are required for Eagle Scouts. So that's citizenship in the community, citizenship in the nation, and citizenship in the world. And those merit badges are kind of near and dear to my heart because they are tied to my values about being a citizen.
What exactly is
So
the goal of those? I mean, what did they represent once
sure,
somebody accomplishes those or receives those?
right. So there are over 100 merit badges in Boy Scouts, but only um, I want to say maybe 12 to 15 are required to earn the rank of Eagle. So these are really important ones.
Mhm.
And the fact that three of those are all citizenship merit badges speaks to the fact that Boy Scouts really believe that understanding the importance of participating in local government, but also understanding how government works is really important. So just I'll use citizenship in the community as one example. Um, Scouts are required to understand the difference between duties and obligations. Um, they need to understand how their local government works. They need to understand that they have opportunities to participate in local government. Um, so I guess that's just a nutshell for just one of those merit badges. Um, but just back to your question, before serving on town council, I served on the Parks and Rec
Oh, okay.
commission. I was also for 4 summers the camp director at the summer camp at Patriots Park. Um, so yeah, I guess that's those are my other commitments to the town of Coventry.
Do you feel that this comes from your experience as a scout and working your way up to becoming an Eagle Scout, that this is just part of you, as you grew up and as realizing that there's more to add to the community, that you can add to the community?
So as I mentioned, my father
Hmm.
was in the Navy. He was in the Navy for 23 years. He retired as a Master Chief. Here's what I learned from that. He never got rich from being in the Navy. Not only was he not making a lot of money, he was enlisted, he wasn't an officer. So he wasn't making a lot of money, and he was giving a lot of himself. Um, Being in the submarine service, there were times when he was at sea for 5 months, leaving my mother in charge of 5 kids. I saw the sacrifices that my parents made, but being a sailor was important to my father. Being in the Navy was really important to him. So I learned something about sacrifice from him. My father, during his career, was stationed at the Pentagon for 2 years. So I lived just outside of Washington, D.C. And this would have been, let's see, around 1977 to 79. Equal Rights Amendment was very much in the news. And my mother took advantage of the fact that we were living right next to Washington, D.C., to get involved with the National Organization for Women that was working very hard on the passage of the ERA. And so I just remember her instilling in us that the importance of you can do something, be involved. So both my father and my mother, I think, did a great job of helping us to understand that we need to be involved.
And then here you are on your second term as a town council member. So
Yes.
let's got about 10 minutes left. So I just wanted to get sort of an idea of, with everything you're already doing in the community, why did you decide to run? What was it that made you decide to run? And seeing as a teacher instead of BOE, Board of Education, the deciding to go on the town council angle. I mean,
Sure.
I know there's politics behind everything, but what was your personal, to say, I'm going to pull the trigger on this one for town council?
The answer is simple. Someone asked me.
Really?
And that is so important. And
Mhm.
I think we all need to be doing a better job of asking people to get involved. It's one thing to post something on social media or have something in the town newsletter that says, we're looking for people to serve on the Parks and Rec Commission or some land use commission. But when somebody actually calls you and says, I think you have something to offer. Have you ever considered getting more involved? That's a really personal interaction, and it's an important. Yeah, I guess it was about 4 years ago. Someone picked up the phone and called me and asked if I would consider running for town council. The fact that I'm not serving on the Board of Education is simply I teach here in town, and that would be a
Oh,
conflict.
yeah. Yep.
So town council for me right now is the right place to be.
Did you understand the commitment you would have to make, especially just running? It's 4 months pretty much to maybe get elected, and then the hours. And we had John Hand on our first one, and he's on the steering committee, and you're also on steering committee. So you're asking people or hoping people will call up to volunteer for a lot of things. But before, I mean, did you understand the commitment you would have to make to this town as a volunteer on the town council?
Yeah, the people I spoke with, I think, were very honest about what the commitment was. But by then, my wife and I were empty nesters. And so I knew I had the time to give. I think the one thing that I really wasn't prepared for were the late evenings. I'm typically an early to bed and early to rise kind of a person. So that's even 3 years in, more than 3 years in. I still have to really prep myself for those late evenings.
Do you take a nap on Mondays?
I am a terrible napper. No, I don't.
Because what is the average meeting? I mean, it's like, how many hours is it for the Mondays?
Well,
I've been a regular
yeah,
town council meeting, and then you have your steering.
right. Yeah, so right, a steering meetings typically are a bit shorter. So I serve on the steering subcommittee. We meet once a month on Mondays. If we're lucky, we can finish on under 2 hours. But a regular town council meeting, especially during budget season, which is what
Hmm.
we're in the middle of right now, run quite a bit longer.
On steering, seeing you've been doing it for 2 terms now, what is it that you would like to see? What's your aim to accomplish in those?
The part of steering that I love the most is getting more people who live in town involved in their town government. We have so many different boards and commissions. We have a cemetery commission. I don't think a lot of people know that. But the cemetery commission has a really important job. And if they don't have enough members, they don't have a quorum and they can't make important decisions about our local cemeteries. Um, we have a, a trails commission, which my wife Nan serves on. People really enjoy going hiking and even trail running on the various trails that we have here in town. But we need a group of citizens who are willing to give up their time to maintain those trails, to make decisions about um, trail use or new trails, to make sure those trails have been mapped. So there are so many different ways that residents can be involved. And that's one of the things that steering does.
And all this is pretty much bipartisan, really. I mean, I
Oh,
know,
very much so.
yeah, that it's about, yeah, I mean, how do you approach, I mean, it's a bipartisan. So how do you say that? I mean, to eliminate, because, we are in the age that we are, and there's a great divide a lot of times, and we see it in Coventry. Let's just be honest that it can get pretty intense, I guess. But how do you approach that? Because it's just stuff that needs to get done for the town to be able to, we can't tax everybody crazily to pay for these things. It has to come from volunteers. So how do you, I guess, eliminate the bipartisan aspect of it, or even address? Do
You
you even
know,
bring it up?
yeah, so fortunately, it really hasn't been an issue during my tenure. Um, I will say that we do try to make sure that we maintain a balance of Republicans and Democrats on different boards and commissions. Um,
And unaffiliated, because
and
that's one of the biggest
well,
voters
well,
block.
I was going to say that we have so many unaffiliated voters that it makes it even less of an issue to try to maintain a balance because if you're, but that's not at the forefront of our thinking. Really, we're looking for people who are talented, who not just have an interest, but have something to give. We have been so fortunate. We have a lot of really talented people who have stepped forward and are giving up their time.
And it proves that, back in the day, I'm old enough, people, depending, having an R or a D next to your name, it didn't really matter. You still had to get things done. And it just proves that that still works, that we still can
Sure.
get things done as a town, no matter what letter you have next to your name, so, and you can see it through the steering committee and everything that you guys oversee. So I just want to pivot right now with the last few minutes that we have to budget season, the dreaded budget season. So I hope you are getting some sleep. I hope you're staying hydrated. But
Yeah.
I guess because the school budget is such a big part of that budget, how do you approach this? Looking at the budget, because once again, the decisions you make affect you too, not only the other citizens in town. So how do you look at that? How do you approach budget season?
Yes, it is true. The education side of our budget is it's about 64%.
Oh wow. Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's significant. We're deliberating. We'll be deliberating even more on possible cuts over the next couple of weeks. We still have to hear from some department heads. We'll be hearing from them at tomorrow night's town council meeting. We'll really start deliberating and trying to come up with a reasonable budget that we hope that our taxpayers can accept. The way I personally look at it is when we make cuts, we should be making cuts with a scalpel instead of with a chainsaw. I go back to what I was saying earlier. We are very fortunate to have an excellent school system, but we can't maintain this if we're not willing to pay for it. So right now, there are, and let's see, I have the data here. Out of 165 districts, we rank 143rd in per pupil spending. We're near the bottom. And then in our DERG, so those are districts who are similar to us in size, socioeconomic economic status, we are 32 out of 33. There is only one district in our DERG who spends less per pupil than we do. That's not a great place to be. Everyone who owns a home here in Coventry, um, they, I think it's important to remember that the value of their home is going to be tied to the success of our school system. People are going to want to move into towns with excellent school systems.
Now, somebody might say, well, if you guys can do this amazing work with that little money, why do you need more?
Mhm.
What would you be
Sure.
response? I mean, everything gets more expensive. We hear that drum beat all the time of inflation and everything's costing more. But from me as an outsider looking in, I was like, how long can you maintain it? Eventually, you're going to start seeing the return for the small amount of money you spend is just going to start catching up and not being the return that you want, not being able to maintain the level of excellency that you have.
No, exactly. I mean, if I were
Okay.
going to use an analogy, I would talk about, you know, my house. I could be the person on my street who has spent the least on home maintenance for 10 years in a row, but that's going to catch up to me. And so, you know, we, it's just not sustainable. It
Mhm.
just doesn't seem sustainable.
So when you're in, and also one thing I've seen, people when the budget was released, the town manager's budget was released. Let's remember that is not the final number. That number is something where you guys start in
That's
negotiations. In
right.
my Hollywood time of doing, agency and dealing with negotiating with studios, there's an ask, but you don't always get what you ask for. So
That's right.
basically,
That's right.
and that's where you are right now is like, okay, there was an ask, but we have to think about how much we can really give, pretty much.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that um, the town manager has already made cuts to what the department heads had asked for.
Hmm.
So the town already isn't on the town side isn't is already not getting everything that they would have hoped to have gotten out of this budget. Um, but we will be deliberating as a council and looking to see if we need to make more cuts and what that's going to look like. But so we don't have a firm number right now.
Hmm. So how do you? I mean, seeing the buck stops here with you guys, and when it comes to education, the BOE, the Board of Education, provided a budget to you, and Dr. Pershon presented it. Seeing that as something, I mean, how do you look at? I mean, I don't know. Is there anything more you would like to say regarding how you look at that part? Seeing it as 64% of the overall budget.
Well, I that's typical. I mean, it's important to remember that that's typical for towns our size. Um, that the education side is going to be the most significant part of the budget. That's true for Bolton. That's true for Tolland. Um, we um, we also we just don't have a lot of commercial businesses here in town to help to sort of balance out what residents are having to pay for. And the recent reval is not helping, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Um, so um, I can't help because I'm a lifelong educator to look at this through the needs of our families and the children here in town. In order to educate the children in Coventry to the level that they deserve, it does cost money. And I accept that. Um, and I also realize, though, that we're not going to get everything we want,
Hmm.
that we have to be responsible. We have to be responsible stewards. But our children deserve the best school system that we can afford to give them.
Now, I don't know if this is a fair question to be the last question, but because it could take us, another half hour. Are you guys thinking about, when especially comes to school budget, about does the chaos that's happening on the federal level, um, is that looming over you? I mean, how are you looking at that just chaotic and what the hell's going on in these decisions that you're making, especially when it comes to the school system?
Right now, it would appear that funding is secure for this coming year from the feds, but that we don't know what's going to happen after that. But it's something we have to be thinking about down the road. Absolutely.
So, Matt, I've taken up enough of your afternoon already. Thank you very much for coming on. Is there any, final thing you would like to say as you continue into budget season, or as you have a prep for a meeting tomorrow of the town council? Is there anything
Yeah.
else you would like?
Want to say that I appreciate all of the effort that the department heads have put into preparing their budgets and preparing their presentations to the town council. They've done a stellar job. It's important to remember that citizens have a voice on the budget. They're welcome to attend our town council meetings. We have an audience of citizens during which they can speak, but they can stick around for the meetings. And if they can't attend live, our meetings are being recorded and they can watch them.
Great. Well, thank you,
Be
Matthew.
a part of government.
Yes, take part. I mean, this is the place, if you want to have influence on government, town government is definitely the place that you have an influence on and a big say. So thank you very much, Matthew. Really appreciate it.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you too, Francis.
Have a great day. Talk to you later.
You too. Bye now.